How's everyone doing? Welcome back to another episode of the Easy Convo. Obviously, today we are joined by a wonderful, phenomenal, what's another word, champ? Spectacular guest today. I'm gonna let Zay do the formal introduction, but before we get into that, how we feeling today, champ? We feeling good?
Good, man. We're good.
Yes, sir.
For sure. But yeah, today we're sitting down with former college and professional basketball player, turned trainer, turned manager, and much more. We're sitting down with Jordan Henriquez. Did I say that correct?
Yep, got that. Yes, sir.
Henriquez. Um, yeah, we have an awesome story today coming for you guys. We're gonna touch on, growing up, playing basketball, his journey, and now what he's doing with his career. So we hope this is an easy conversation for you today, Jordan. We appreciate you coming on.
Absolutely. I appreciate you guys having me. It's an honor.
Sure. Jordan, I'm gonna be honest, man, before we get into the journey and everything that your career has entailed and it continues to entail, I'm gonna be honest with you, bro. I'm a KU fan. I am. I'm a KU fan, born and bred. I got the flag upstairs.
Yeah.
So I got a couple questions for you when we get down that line, but
Uh-huh.
before when we get to that point, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Where you're from and your upbringing a little bit.
Yeah, nah, man. But well, it's funny that you got the KU background. I love to hear it. Before I dive into myself, one random summer I lived in Lawrence.
Mm.
Not a lot of people know that, but one of our really good friends is Brady Morningstar. Uh, and his family are like my family. So yeah, just one random summer I was living in Lawrence with Brady, but me and Brady was teammates in Germany for a year.
Nice.
Yeah, but just to kind of dive into my background and where I'm from. I'm from New York City. I was born in Long Island, pretty much raised in Queens, but mom moved around a lot throughout New York. So I lived in Harlem, lived in Queens, lived in Long Island some as well. A little bit of everything, but at the same time, just having that different backgrounds of different environments throughout my childhood growing up. My mom was independent. She was a single parent. She raised me, my mom, and my sister alone by herself. So a lot of the time she had to just kind of move on the fly based on, her opportunities when it came to work and things like that to that nature. So I tell a lot of people I'm from I'm from Queens, but like a lot of my childhood friends is from Long Island as well. But at the same time, I spent a lot of time between Westchester County, which is kind of a little bit further than the Bronx, Harlem as well, where I've still got a lot of good friends and connections through there, and then Long Island as well and Queens because my dad lived in Queens. When I was growing up, so a little bit of everywhere. I got some soil touched with my New York City background, but at the same time, just being a part of a culture in New York and growing up playing basketball there, I've seen the ins and outs of not only just my development, but the evolution of basketball coming from New York City. I know they like a lot of people like to say, that's kind of like the mecca when it comes to it outside of Indiana, who's like quote unquote, they got it, and I know Kansas is up there too, as well. But for New York City, they always talk about point guards and guards being skillful and always attacking the rim, but there's some really good big guys that's come out of New York City as well. Not to like shine light on myself, but just guys in the past that really put on not only in high school but at the collegiate level as well.
Mm.
Definitely, man. And, growing up in, New York, what do you think kind of shaped that competitive nature to you, growing up in your childhood and, growing throughout high school?
I would say just the competitiveness of being on the floor with guards that primarily wanted the ball, and I wasn't necessarily ready yet. Like, and I'm really kind of dating back to like elementary, middle school, where I loved playing the game, but I was growing so much. My body wasn't used to the transformation of that I was having on the court. So a lot of the times I was growing up just being clumsy, being on the court, having bad hands, my feet growing nonstop. Since I was the age of 10, all the way up till I was like 19, my foot grew with my age. My foot size grew with my age. So
Mm.
a lot of off balances. And then when I really got to high school, I pretty much I kind of came into my own. but at the same time, just kind of being around that mecca of basketball where it was really guard dominant. You know, we watched and one basketball growing up. You know, when and one would come to Riverbank State Park, you know, me and my boys would take the train up there just to go be a part of it. Well, not necessarily be a part of it, but to go and get that experience, right, while they go and perform. Uh, so just knowing like basketball has just always been surrounded around me. I don't feel like I was always forced to play basketball, but because I was tall, people were always like, "Hey, like, why don't you come play for us and whatnot?" And even though I wasn't really there skillfully yet, I still had certain intangibles like defensively that actually showed out more on the collegiate level. But at the same time, being in middle school, being in elementary school, I was the tallest kid, not only just in my classroom but on the court.
Definitely, man. And you speak on that growth, and I relate to you so much when you say your shoe size grows with your age. So when you're 12, you're wearing a 12.
Right.
When you're 13, and that's so real for somebody who's a taller guy in any community or atmosphere they're in. But could you speak more on that mental side of things? Just growing up, being the tallest kid, having this not necessarily
Hmm.
expectation, but it's like, man, you 6'5", you might as well come hoop. You know, you
Right.
6, you might as well come get out here and mess around with us or something like that. And especially being in a mecca like New York City, being in a basketball environment like New York City, can you speak more towards the mental side of things of how that shaped you and how you were able to continue to find yourself within that?
No, for sure. And that's a great question. You know, I originally was playing baseball first, and I had a passion for that. Huge Yankees fan. I mean, I got the logo tattooed on me. Haven't seen us won since 2009, but you know, we gonna be all right. You know, we got a bright future ahead. But
Six, never.
just from the aspect of playing baseball and having high expectations for myself, my family having that background of being in athletics. Uh, I did feel that pressure as from a young age, not necessarily to the point where I understood all the ins and outs of it. But my grandfather was he was Roberto Duran's translator throughout his career, and knowing that, and knowing that my grandfather had all these connections to like Don King, Pat Riley. I mean, my grandfather was in the circle of a lot of different people, and that was inspiring to me. But I also felt that pressure, like, dang, I need to get there. And even I don't know if it's going to be with baseball. I didn't know what it was going to be, but I'm like, I see my grandfather in this light. Uh, Roberto Duran at that time was in his prime, so I knew I wanted to be in that light. And from a young age, I watched my uncle growing up. Uh, he played for Jim Calhoun at Northeastern, and then he went and won a conference championship after he transferred from Northeastern to VCU. So knowing that my uncle had that pass in basketball, not necessarily where I watched him growing up playing as much, because by the time I was, a jit, he was already retired and working with American Airlines. At the time, it was TWA, and then American Airlines bought him out. But people knew who my uncle was. People knew who my grandfather was. So I always felt like I need to continue to represent our last name and put on, but I want to be that person that gets to the NBA. And I always kind of put that pressure on myself, even when I was trying to figure out whether I was going to continue playing baseball, whether I was going to shift over and play basketball and take it really serious. I came to those crossroads when I was about 11. Uh, I was playing baseball. I was extremely uncoordinated. I was probably 10 at the time. I was extremely uncoordinated. My mom didn't know at the time. You gotta wear a cup playing baseball. I got hit in the midsection. I clocked out after that. Like I was like, yo, this is not it for me. Even when I was wearing one, this is kind of I was wearing one. I'm like, this is not even comfortable. Like I'd rather pick up a basketball. My mom was like, no, we're not shifting to that yet. You're gonna swim. Then she gave me the example like Tim Duncan is an Olympic swimmer. You're tall. I want you to swim. And I'm like, all right, let's give it a shot. When I couldn't learn how to tread water, I'm like, Ma, it's over. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, I'll do this from like a standpoint of me learning how to swim, not a problem. but we have multiple different beaches in New York. Not to say now back in the day it was much more clean. I can't say that now. But almost drowned as a kid. I was in the ocean at one of the beaches, and that was the eye opener for me. Like, okay, yeah, it's time. I'm not getting in the ocean. Like, it's over. Like, and I'll be honest, like I probably haven't been in the ocean where I'm going out where now I'm 7 feet tall. I'm not going out waist deep in the ocean now, just from that trauma from being a kid when I was like 11 or 12 years old. And just from the mental side of things of knowing that, just having that pressure, not necessarily from my family, but seeing them in that light, I knew I wanted to be there and do everything I can to get there. So as I got older, and I started to figure my body out, I took basketball so serious that I was okay with not touching the basketball. I was okay with just being the big guy that runs the floor and blocks shots.
Mhm.
And those intangibles allowed me to be great in college on the defensive side of things because I didn't need the ball necessarily to impact the game and to impact winning. So those were certain intangibles that I had instilled in me from a young age because New York City basketball, they're known for their guard play. So I might be screening and running and just running on a high motor and playing with high energy. I learned how to do that first, and I think that's what helped me get recruited to high major programs.
Definitely. Mhm.
Definitely. You talk about handling pressure, growing in your game throughout high school and moving on to college. Who were some of those mentors throughout your early days that kind of instilled in you how you approach the game? You obviously had an uncle that played
Hmm.
collegiate basketball. You had a grandfather that was really, connected in the basketball community. Was there any mentors outside of, family itself that kind of instilled in you how you approach the game?
Yeah, I would say one of my first mentors was Wayne Banner. Wayne Banner was at he was at Millbank, and Millbank. It's funny about Millbank in my time and my age. We all, me, ASAP Rocky, 12E, we all went to Millbank together, like after school program in Harlem. This is when we was living in Harlem. Me and my family was living in Harlem, and we all just used to hoop together at the same time. So uh, it's kind of dope that Wayne kind of took me under the wing and tried to help develop me. At the same time, knowing that I was a good kid, and me migrating from Long Island to living in Harlem, and kind of being in a different atmosphere with kids that might come from single family homes versus a two-parent family home, and just kind of being in that atmosphere of just being around love and that support. Wayne Banner was one of those guys that he kind of instilled some, I would say, just being a good human being. I learned how to be a good human being outside of like my parents that taught me how and raised me the right way. Wayne Banner was one of those first guys. And then Shandu McNeil, till this day, he's one of my mentors. He's the program director for New York Lightning, which was Long Island Lightning back in the day. I was probably I was part of that first 15 and under team, 15, 16, and 17s when they started Long Island Lightning on the Reebok circuit. I was that first group, that wave of 15s to come through the program, and till this day, heavily involved with New York Lightning, uh, and just wanting to impact a lot of kids' lives. Where I don't do anything for money. It's all about being an inspiration to kids, developing them, guiding them, because I know nowadays it's a different ball game when you're growing up playing through high school, trying to get to the next level to play at the collegiate level. And then I would say Big Lou. Big Lou is another one of my mentors. Uh, he reached out to my mom and me after I got kicked out of Rice High School. I went to Rice High School with Kimber Walker. We were freshmen together. And then we played varsity together as sophomores. Now, granted, me and Kimber didn't even touch the floor as sophomores. And if people know who Kimber Walker is, a lot of people do. A lot of people don't even know. Like his sophomore year, he was playing varsity, and it wasn't necessarily one of those guys because you had Edgar Sosa, you had Curtis Kelly, you had Kashif Pratt, you had Trayvon Charles. Those guys were the upperclassmen who, Rice. We were ranked top 5 in the country pretty much all year uh, in basketball, and man, I think we went and played Kevin Love. We played a ton of guys, but because we were all boys Catholic school, um, you know, Kimball was one of those guys that was under the radar that a lot of people didn't keep their eye on, and he just worked his tail off and pretty much past everybody. But it was the hard work and dedication he put into it. But yeah.
You speak to like
Mm,
Kimba. I immediately I think the ear trains you to you hear that big name Kimba Walker. You know what I'm
mhm,
saying? And for us, Zayd and I, like we when we're coming up, like Kimba's established. You know, Kimba's an established,
mhm,
and obviously, you being able to play with them. But speaking more to your career, when you see that evolution, when you see Kimba being somebody who continues to work and work and work, when was that moment for you outside of just that experience when it was like, talent alone isn't going to get me over this hump, or being
mhm,
a, 6'10", 7 foot guy isn't going to necessarily get me in this door. And you kind of spoke to it earlier with in terms of, I mean, we both can relate to this being a big, like you got to have a high motor,
mhm.
be able to run the
Yep.
floor, block shots, want to rebound. Like when was that um, realization really strong for you growing up, and then how did that eventually evolve into the career that you were able to have?
Yeah, I would say in middle school I was going into no, I would say ninth grade. When I was playing with Lightning. No, I apologize. It was eighth grade. That summer going into eighth grade, I caught my first dunk in a game. I was
Man.
probably like 6'6" at the time. It was it was a huge moment for me. I probably cut my fingers open because I didn't necessarily know how to dunk. And then from there, I knew I had a chance if I put the work in.
Mhm.
And obviously, with my grandfather and my uncle, being that inspiration to me and wanting to get to that level, uh, a lot of that inspiration came from Kimba because as freshmen together, my mom didn't let me play on a freshman team. We were one of the top ranked freshman class in the country with all the talent that we had come to Rice High School. And because my grades weren't where they were, my mom was like, I don't care. You're not playing basketball this year. So I knew that I had to lock in the classroom, and then I knew I had to lock in from a player development standpoint because I knew I wasn't necessarily there yet because as a sophomore playing varsity with Curtis Kelly, who is one of those guys. He also played at Kansas State with me for 2 years. Uh, I knew I had a long way to go, and Curtis Kelly was borderline McDonald's All American. He was one of the top guys, top power forwards in his class as well. And when I got kicked out of Rice for my grades, uh, and I seen Kimba take that step that summer, that spring and summer, I knew I had to take a step too. And me and Kimba also played AAU together with Lightning. So Shandu McNeil, who's my mentor, he was pretty much the one that I don't want to quote it because I don't want to be wrong, but he's the one that put Kimba on that AAU platform. We were playing together first for 15 and under, and then Gauchos came and got him. Rest is history from there. But learning how to play with Kimba and him being that guy that literally was under the radar and took his game to the next level, that was a part of my inspiration because I'm like, we were almost in the same boat. We were playing on the same AAU team. Nobody knew who we were. And then, once we were at Rice and we didn't necessarily play as sophomores, we both knew like, all right, it's time for us to take that next step. And that goes along with Chris Fausch, who played at Drexel, and as well as Dorville Carter, who played, I believe, played at Marist. We were all those young guys, as well as Durant Scott, Momo Jones, on that Rice team where we knew, all right, this next spring and summer, we got to take it to the next level. And even though I didn't finish out playing with those guys, with those group of guys at Rice, they're still my brothers to this day because we literally came into this together. And but Kimba was a huge inspiration because I seen the jump he took from that spring and summer. And then when I transferred to Portchester High School, uh, which Big Lou I was talking about with my mentor, I played with his son for our last 2 years, and his son Louis Larissa, he passed away about 8 years ago. Uh, but he was my point guard, and he was one of those point guards. Now he wasn't a New York City point guard. We were out in Westchester County, so he was one of those guys that like he could shoot the ball, but he was a playmaker first. And he was like really one of those first guards that would like really get me the ball and try to feed it to me. So then I started picking up my confidence on offense. So and that even inspired me more to work on my game because I'm like, all right, I just grew up this entire time just being a guy that's running the floor, blocking shots, rebounding, just playing extremely hard. Then I had to like find a way to balance it, like with my high motor, and then still be the number one guy on a team where they were looking for me to score the ball because there wasn't too many 7-foot guys in Westchester. One of my bigger competitors was like Mookie Jones, who played at Syracuse, Kevin Jones, that played at Mount Vernon. Was it Mount Vernon? I think it wasn't Christ the King, but maybe it was Mount Vernon. Kevin Jones, he played at West Virginia with Chuck Bryant. Those two of my brothers there. But I knew when I was going into my junior year, I wasn't even the best player in Westchester at that time, coming from Rice. And seeing those guys already being top ranked in the state of New York, I knew I needed to get there. And that's when I took my jump in my game.
Definitely. And
Definitely.
Zayd, I know I got a couple questions in regards to recruitment and the elevation in Jordan's game continued from there. But I want to touch on this real quick. Zay, you know, you a guard, man. You don't really get it as much, but you don't know how much it does for a big's confidence when your guards is like, oh man, like they dump it down to you, like, yo man, get busy down there. They're like,
Right.
oh, when you roll, like look for it. I'm looking for you, and they genuinely mean it. That does a lot for the confidence of the bigs.
Hmm.
Jordan, you speak to it a lot right there, and I can relate to you heavily on that. But
Yep.
we just want to take a moment and pause real quick for anyone listening to this podcast. If you like the content, make sure you like, comment, share, subscribe. Make sure you tap in with the Class 1% brand. They're putting out phenomenal clothing. They're putting out phenomenal messages on their Instagram, on their platforms consistently. So make sure you guys are checking out what they have going on over there. It's phenomenal work that they're doing. But we'll get back to you guys with more content here soon.
Yeah, definitely. And as you mentioned, we're gonna jump into kind of your transition, going to K State and kind of your recruitment time, and ultimately what led into that decision to go to K State. So you kind of want to just talk about that time in your life, and what ultimately led
Hmm.
you to decide to be a Wildcat.
Yeah. So leading up to that, I was being recruited by mid majors, and I was pretty much in that transition between me going from Rice to Portchester and having a really good year my junior year, and losing to go to states. I lost to Mookie Jones, Peekskill. Uh, that spring and summer is when I took that jump in my recruitment, where I was pretty much getting recruited by mid majors throughout. I kind of had thought that, and I also had it figured out that I was going to Rhode Island. And the year after ABCD, they had Reebok U Camp. And Reebok U was essentially ABCD. They just changed the name, they rebranded it. And I was in that camp with John Wall, DeMarcus Cousins, Ronaldo Sidney, LeBron Nash. I mean, it was so many hitters, Isaiah Thomas, where if I see them today, we remember that time in Reebok U because Reebok U didn't necessarily last that long. I think it pretty much diminished after that first year, and then we just never heard of it again. I don't know, maybe they had it that following summer, but um, when I went to Reebok U, I guarded and played my tail off against all the top bigs in the country. And then my process of being recruited by mid majors was like this whitewash. It was gone. Like all the high majors started calling. You get the mail from the college coaches. Now I know from being a college coach myself, it's all it's all auto generated. They send it out. I don't even think they do that anymore. Like I think it's over for that. Those days is
That's
past.
I
You
was
just pick up the phone and call now.
Joe, I was going to touch on that real quick. Obviously,
Yeah.
we're touching on your transition to
Hmm.
K State and that decision, but you mentioned that real quick. Just the shift in recruitment, like
Hmm.
then it was a lot more letter style, phone call. Even you got some coaches coming to the front door, knocking on the door. Hey man, like
Right.
we love your game, and it's a genuine approach. Whereas now it's like, it's one DM away. Hey, I saw you at the camp this weekend.
Hmm.
Who's recruiting you? and
Right.
and that shift. And I just wanted to highlight that real quick because it's weird how, not weird, but it's pretty unique how the game just it moves so quickly nowadays.
1000%. And you kind of gotta stay on your heels. You gotta stay locked in, especially as a student athlete,
Mhm.
because you don't know what to believe and what not. Even if a coach reaches out to you, they just might be doing that to touch base with you, and may not be necessarily ready to make an offer to you. But the fact that you're a DM away or, a phone call away. It's just it's insane versus having to wait till your junior senior year to really see that letter, and then that letter turn into a phone call, and then that phone call turn into an unofficial visit, and then an official visit. Like that process is like just so sped up now. But to just kind of track back towards that transition for me, from going from mid major to high major. uh I figured I was going to Rhode Island, and then I remember seeing all the assistant coaches from Memphis at the time when Cal was there. So I'm like, man, this is deep, because the year before, I think at that time D Rose was playing at Memphis. So I'm like, damn, I'm about to get recruited. I'm about to get offered to Memphis, and then Cal leaves Memphis and then goes to Kentucky. Uh, and then I think he brought some of that staff with him. But then from there, I get a phone call from Delonte Hill, the beginning of my senior year. And the first thing Delonte Hill says is, "All right, yeah, this is Coach Delonte Hill from Kansas State University. You ever heard of Michael Beasley?" And I'm like, "Oh, this is different. Like that's a huge name drop. I never had an assistant coach call me and just drop a player like that." And from there, I was sold on K State. Me and Curtis Kelly took an unofficial visit there together in the spring. Bees had just left to transition to the NBA after his freshman year. I had to take a post grad year, but I knew I was going to K State. I committed to K State in that spring, and a part of that recruitment, Frank Martin flew to the Bronx. Uh, Gauchos kind of reconnected me with Kansas State through Mo Hicks, because I played for Mo Hicks uh, at Rice High School, and Dwayne Mitchell. I didn't necessarily play for them, essentially, maybe outside of like 1 or 2 tournaments for K State to see me, because I knew, like, I was a senior and I was on the AAU circuit, but it was solely just for K State to kind of like have their eyes and ears on me for 2 tournaments, and then boom, the offers came, and then I committed and whatnot. But because I knew I was going post grad, it wasn't really to just kind of reopen my recruitment. It was just really for K State to to see me 2 times, and then made the offer. So it wasn't like a whole spring and summer where I was on the circuit as a senior, or uh, I don't know, I forgot what they used to call it, but like seniors being on a circuit with juniors is like, nowadays it's I was essentially like a reclass, for 2 tournaments. But yeah, man, like Frank came to the Bronx, and funny story with Frank is like, and I know we'll dive into Frank too, but Frank came to the Bronx, and I'm sitting down in the office, and because my last name is Henriquez, he starts talking to me in Spanish, like to start it off. And I'm like, "Yo, Frank, I don't speak no Spanish." He's like, "Oh, come on, man. I thought you was Latino." I'm like, "I am. I just don't speak no Spanish, bro." So, and then the rest there is history, man. But nah, Frank, that's my guy, man. But yeah.
That's hilarious, man. The dedication. I'm thinking he on the plane the whole time trying to make sure he got all the sentences down just for you to be like, "Yo, bro, like not even a lot, what are we doing?"
Right,
That's
right.
awesome, man. Was when you hear the name Michael Beasley, that's obviously again like a name like Kimball Walker, it just rings bells in the mind.
Mm-hmm.
And was that the first calling card for you of like, nah, this is high level basketball. This is Big 12 basketball. This is where I need to be. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, it was for sure, because I think between them, Mizzou, and Nebraska,
Mhm.
K State showed the most interest, and Frank took his time to come and see me. And I knew from there he was serious. And then when I had to go to prep school, he gave me 2 different options about going to the Winchendon school or going to Notre Dame prep. And he was transparent with me. He said, if you really want the best skill development and the best human development, I would advise you to go to the Winchendon school. Coach Michael Burns, he was somebody that was a good friend of Frank. Burns played for Calipari as well at UMass back in the day. And Coach Burns, if I didn't go through Coach Burns as that prep school year, I wouldn't have been ready as a freshman coming into the Big 12. And I might have played 8 or 9 minutes a game, but in some of those games, man, it was, especially Big 12 games, I was very impactful to helping us win games. And that year got me prepared to come into the Big 12 versus just coming out of high school. Because if I'd have just came out of high school, they probably would have just redshirted me. I needed that year for my body, for my mind. Burns was one of those military-driven guys, and at the same time, man, Burns is our height, so he's like 6'10", 6'11". So like he's one of those guys that's like, yo, when he talks, you gotta listen. Like, and from there, he helped mold me into being who a man that I was today, and still a dear friend of mine for sure.
Definitely. You know, you
Hmm.
mentioned Frank Martin obviously quite a bit.
Hmm.
Obviously, when I was young, when Frank Martin was coaching at K State, but I just remember, everyone knew him for just being an animated, hard nosed guy. But I think now, after playing collegiate basketball, like that is like you kind of grow an appreciation for that, and that's the type of coach you want to play for.
Hmm.
That's how you learn and grow, not just as a basketball player and as a person as well. Kind of talk on your experience, playing for Coach Martin at K State, kind of some of the lessons he taught you.
Yeah, I think Frank taught a lot of us how to be men. A lot of us that prepared to go into that world that we knew nothing about after you graduate. He molded us into some of the some of the people that we are today, and he taught a lot of life lessons. He was hard nosed. We practiced for 3 hours every day, and even after being on the court for 3 hours, and we're in that huddle, good practice, bad practice. He was talking to us for at least 10 to 20 minutes after. Uh, while we're dead tired, but we learned how to listen, even being fatigued, and a lot of those things carried with us not only just as men, but even through adversity, not only just in life, but at the same time on the court. Uh, and we won a lot of games together with Frank. I'm blessed to be a part of the all-time winningest class at Kansas State, and a lot of those wins came with Frank. Um, but Frank helped us, even when we transitioned into playing for Bruce Weber, that group that stayed there, which Bruce retained everybody for a year at least, from Coach Martin's team. You know, everything that Frank taught us and instilled in us and that staff, uh, Coach Weber found that balance, and then we ended up winning our first conference championship since 1977. But those times with Frank, man, it was mentally challenging. It was mentally challenging because he wanted so much more from you, and the expectations he had for you was so high. He was always transparent about saying, if I'm not talking to you, if I'm not screaming at you, then I'm clocked out with you. That means I don't care anymore, and then you can go. So when we knew that he was hard nosed, and he knew when he was screaming at us, sometimes cursing at us, uh, we knew he cared, and it somewhat came from a good place because I know now being in the college basketball realm, the amount of pressure you have of being a head coach. Now, granted, I wasn't a head coach in college, but being a head coach for Purple Rain, it's a lot of pressure on you, and I can't imagine what all he had to endure being in that transition phase of coming under Coach Huggins and then taking over after Coach Huggins leaves, coaching Michael Beasley, who was a number 2 draft pick, and then the expectations after that. So, uh, till this day, me and Frank share conversations of the good times and the bad times we had together.
How do you feel that for you personally, the locker room leadership elevated? And when I ask that question, I mean in the sense of coming in from a prep school to now being asked to step into a role that you said you were prepared for and ready to thrive in for the team, but you're still a freshman. Like you're still a
Hmm.
freshman. There's still older guys above you and things like that. But how do you feel that your locker room leadership playing under Frank and then transitioning to another coach, how do you feel that your leadership role elevated year after year after year?
Yeah, I will give a lot of credits to Jacob Pullen. Jacob Pullen was somebody that, after Michael Beasley left, they came in as freshmen together. His sophomore year, they went to the NIT. And from there, he took on that leadership role as a junior and 5 incoming freshmen and putting us under the wing. And I came in with Wally Judge, who is still to this day the last McDonald's All-American to come to Kansas State out of high school. And Jacob Pullen's leadership qualities and tendencies, he made us feel that when it was our turn to step up and be leaders once he was gone, we would be prepared for that. And those things came from how he carried himself off the court, his image, and then also on the court being demanding of the younger guys on that roster and taking that leadership to help them feel like you're always going to be a part of this, whether it's your turn, your time or not. But what I need from you is to be 1% better every single day. And even with having somebody like Frank Martin as your head coach, a Brad Underwood who just coached in the in the Final Four, some of these guys who are legendary names now in this college basketball game, you know, they believed in Jacob because Jacob made them trust him. And once
No, you're good.
We're good. We're good.
Okay,
Connected.
cool. Yeah, it helped with that transition with Michael Beasley, that foundation. But Jacob Pullen was the one that instilled a lot of things in us with 5 incoming freshmen and putting us under his wing.
Loaded. Locked and loaded.
Yeah.
Looking back at your K State career now, obviously you left a great legacy at K State. What part of your legacy there you think means the most to you now when you look back at it?
Yeah, I would say just, throughout my time there, being a people person, learning how to be a people person, coming from New York, being in a town where it was very college like driven, where it wasn't like a New York City or anything like that. um I think a part of that was, I give a little bit more credit to as well, spending that year in Winchton, Massachusetts, where it was a small town as well, and learning how to have that impact and enjoying the community and whatnot, to things to that nature. So, you know Manhattan is a special place, and it allowed me to, not only just build relationships, but sustain them over the course of time. And even as a professional athlete, I always took time within those 2 months of having off to, with my family and loved ones, always coming back to Manhattan, always being impactful, whether I was coming back to work basketball camps with Coach Weber, whether it was just going out to eat, whether it was just sitting down with the athletic director and having a conversation with him for 30 minutes. A lot of those things, I think it came back around full circle, where not necessarily where, me and my brother Nino talk about all the time. We missed that window of NIL. Uh, but the amount of relationships we sustained and endured throughout that time of us being away from being student athletes at Kansas State, coming back and just being a part of the community, is part of the reason why we're back now today.
Do you speak on missing that window of NIL? Do you think that knowing yourself, knowing the guys around you, that would have been something that was, I guess, surreal to have at that time? What would that have
Mhm.
what would that have looked like at that time of basketball for you guys, being able to take on that NIL, those checks and things like that per se?
Right, that's a great question. We talk about it all the time because we still got a group chat 15 years later till this day. Like all of us that played together throughout the years, and we talk about it a lot. Where we were so good, everybody would have had an offer to go somewhere else, and we were so connected as brothers we would have tried to find a way to figure it out, like on staying together. But at the same time, money talks. We all come from different backgrounds and situations for our family and having to provide for them. So we always kind of go back and forth, like, yeah, I would have stayed or I probably would have left, because I felt so connected to that community, and because somebody like a Frank Martin and a Jacob Pullen, uh, who bled K State, and as a young man being a freshman, I probably would have stuck it through because I would have wanted my own legacy as well. And I think as a young man coming out of high school, you know, I wouldn't have wanted to be a part of four different rosters, four different schools, because I tell kids now, if a school's gonna give you, if your school that you're currently at, and I'm talking about from like a high major standpoint, because I know if you go to low to mid to high, you got to make that jump because the NIL bag is different. But if you're at that high major program and that staff is willing to invest in you, and even though there's other schools that's coming at you with more money, I'm just talking through experience now. Not granted having NIL, but from a legacy standpoint, if you go from school to school, you're not going to have a legacy unless you go in somewhere to win a national championship. You're not going to be able to come back to that school and or really necessarily be welcome back, because every school you leave, you're kind of somewhat of burning a bridge. Yes, business is business, but legacy goes a long way, man. And at the age of 36 now, uh, even when I came to those crossroads of like, dang, do I really want to transfer from Kansas State? Have to sit out a year? Nah, man, I'll figure it out. I'm here with my brothers. We all believe in each other. Because me and Frank went at it. Me and Frank went at it. We had a serious, deep conversation um, in the spring at Arby's after we lost to Wisconsin. And granted, I've never ate Arby's a day in my life. I said, Frank, can we go anywhere else? He's like, nah, we're gonna meet at Arby's because I think he liked Arby's. And Frank told me, man to man, heart to heart, like if this is something you want to do, and if you want to be one of these leaders and lead these young men now that my upperclassmen are gone, I need you to figure it out. And from there, I made that decision right then and there. Like, I got to change my habits so that not only can I lead these younger guys with my upperclassmen, but I need to think now take that next step because I want to play in the NBA. And that tracks back to being 8, 9, 10 years old, watching my grandfather being that light on the boxing side of things, and then knowing my uncle who he was. I reflect back on that time because if I had to transfer, I knew my legacy wouldn't be the same. I just had a firm, feel for that.
That's real.
Definitely. And I like how you touch on like, you had to figure it out. I think like
Hmm.
the current landscape of college basketball, with the current state of like the transfer portal, NIL, a lot of dudes don't have, and I can admit that being someone playing in this current state of college basketball, playing,
Hmm.
um, you can cope out and you can just transfer out right away. You don't necessarily have to figure out, and I do think that's a cool thing about when you guys used to play.
Right.
You had to figure things out. And I think that was a good for your character development as a person. Because
Hmm.
outside of basketball, after you get done playing college basketball, you have to figure things out. You can't always just look for another option to go work somewhere else, do something else. So I think that's just something with our current college basketball people play, and I think that's something we lack.
Hmm.
But you mentioned going to that, wanting to play in the NBA, and obviously you played, did some time professionally. Kind of talk about that transition, going from college to now being a professional athlete.
Yeah, my senior year was tough for me after having that coaching change. Bruce Weber is a person that I genuinely care for. He's a great human being. He's somebody that challenged me as a basketball player uh, and as a leader of one of our team, our championship team back in 2013. Uh, but it didn't really play in my favor my senior year. But I know that I was somebody that I was on the draft boards going into my senior year, and having that, and somebody that after my junior year in that NCAA tournament against Syracuse, I think I had 15 and 17, 11 offensive rebounds. I don't know if I still tied the offensive rebound record in the NCAA tournament with Patrick Ewing, but because I know there's been a lot of guys that's come through monsters now. Now they're grown men playing in NCAA tournament. But I was on those draft boards, and I had to make a decision if I wanted to declare or not. But it was such that time then was so different. But being in that portal of having your name in the draft and then having to take your name out by a certain time, that window pretty much was open when the NCAA tournament was going on, and then I think it closed like a week later. So I didn't necessarily have a lot of time. So that transition for me to come back to Kansas State, my minutes was cut in half essentially, and I don't regret it anymore because I used to, because I was like, man, if I'd have just put my name in, declared, uh, I'd probably be a 12, 13, 14-year veteran guy now. But like I said about, young guys, and their legacy, I don't regret coming back because we won a Big 12, uh, making history, winning since 1977. That was unheard of at that time because so many years had passed by. And a lot of people that I reconnect with or I run into just being in the Kansas area, or even being in Manhattan, they remember 2013 because they hadn't won since 77. And a lot of people weren't even alive, unless it's like the older people, that was able to experience that. So, I don't even look back on it anymore. But at the same time, I wouldn't have mind being a 14, 15-year vet and still having this conversation with you.
100. And I
Because
want
I'll probably still be a corporate man in America right now, being retired. So, but just reflecting back on that time, it's just, it's all about the people, and the people in Manhattan, the people in Kansas, all around. It's all about giving back for me now, giving my energy, giving my love, uh, and wanting to develop the youth.
This is more of a personal question from me because now, um, being a former college athlete, trying to take that transition into the professional basketball world, what advice do you have for someone in my position or someone who's in a similar position of how quickly, like, the you spoke on how you were a high draft board guy, you'd returned to K State that following year, obviously, I say reaping, but benefiting from the successes that come from that year, but still being like, okay, now my draft route is a little bit different. And
Hmm.
how quickly that's able to happen within a span of 9 to 10 months. Could you
Right.
touch on how quickly the professional world moves in a basketball sense and things like that?
Yeah, it moved fast. I signed with an agency that had me out in LA. I had my best friend with me, David Elliott. He's a financial advisor for Morgan Stanley who focuses on the sports and entertainment industry. And, we were out in Cali together, and one of my roommates was Norvell Pell, was in that agency, and he played in the NBA for quite some time. So, you know, I probably worked out for about 5 or 6 NBA teams with playing only 15 minutes a game. And I think the scouts knew like what I was already capable of, despite whatever I went through at Kansas State my senior year. So being able to still come out and showcase my talents within that draft process, uh, you know, working out for the New York Knicks, even though they didn't necessarily have a draft pick, knowing like, well, they only had one draft pick, but knowing like they would have drafted me back home if they had additional picks. I think that transition I was prepared for it. I was prepared for it. And a lot of that took from coming out and working with my trainers out in LA, preparing me for the draft. And that draft class was kind of weak, when they do the redraft, all the stuff on social media. But at the same time, I played my tail off in summer league with the Houston Rockets. They signed me. To a non-guaranteed contract, but I was on the NBA roster, but that's because of the work I put in to get there. And the situation I walked into, I was with 4 of the big guys, and one of those big guys was the best center in the NBA with Dwight Howard, good friend of mine till this day, who full circle moment where when I worked for the Los Angeles Lakers, he was on that roster as well, working with him every day, getting him ready for each game, night in, night out. The Houston Rockets playing with James Harden, Me and James, we have a solid relationship. Where I don't necessarily pick up the phone and call him anymore. Or he calls me, but you know, when I came in as a rookie, he took me under the wing, and that phone call came from Kashif Pratt, who was working for Nike at the time. Uh, but Kashif Pratt was one of my big guys, one of my big bros on the Rice roster. He played with Curtis Kelly, and Kashif called James, like, "Hey, look, take my young boy under the wing." And me and James' birthday is like 2-3 days apart, so we both Virgos. So we always kind of shared that moment with that time span that I was there, and seeing the level that he played at every day. Uh, James being somebody that thrived with playing with bigs in the pick and roll, I enjoyed playing with him. I enjoyed playing with Pat Beverly. Pat Beverly just came from EuroLeague. Pat Beverly demanded the utmost, work ethic, like bringing it every possession and holding you accountable. And that's why he was a 10-plus NBA vet. So I came into a role and on a roster where guys, wanted to be great. James, he wasn't there yet. He was in that transition phase of like being in Houston for maybe about a year now, going into that second or third year. I can't remember, but like he was turning into himself. And having somebody like Dwight, who was the best center in the NBA, I'm watching him like, okay, I'm watching his work ethic, and I'm like, okay, I know I work hard, but I'm still missing something else where like I want to be that good. Even if I wasn't that good, I want to be there because I know I see it in front of me. And being on that roster was a part of something that, there's quite a few guys on that roster where I still keep in touch with.
Definitely. And you make that transition, you play professionally, and then you decide, to kind of switch from being the player, playing in those games, being the player in the NBA, playing professionally, to now being the mentor, the coach. Kind of what led you into the decision to kind of make that transition from being a player to wanting to, be a trainer, be a coach, and be involved in that aspect?
Yeah, I think a lot of that came from when I was working those basketball camps with Bruce Weber. I was super competitive with the guys, with the kids, exactly. Uh, I used to brag about like winning the camp championships and just kind of knowing that I always wanted to have an impact on people's lives. Uh, but when I was a GA at K State, it was an eye opener for me because my entire life I won. And when I got back to K State as a grad assistant, we were all coming off the high of winning the Big 12 in 2018 with Barry Brown, Dean Wade, Kamal Stokes, Xavier Sneed.
Mm-hmm.
Winning the Big 12 with that same group of guys. I wasn't necessarily there, but I was a part of their development because I would always come back in the summertime. And at that time, we were still playing. We were playing in the TBT tournament. I was still a professional athlete. Uh, and we worked hard with those guys on the court, and we demanded the most out of those guys and when they were young as freshmen and sophomores, and then they took it upon themselves when they were juniors and seniors to take it to the most high. So just to be a part of something special like that, as a professional athlete and seeing those guys succeed, I was kind of at that crossroad where I was depressed for 2 years. I got hurt. I didn't know that I was going to not play basketball anymore. I took a year off to work on my body to get healthy, and that injury that I sustained, I told myself, even if I can get back to being 100%, do I really want to go through this again? And I kind of just came to those crossroads where I was like, I got to walk away from it. But nah, I faced 2 years of depression. I was making a ton of money in New York. My father is a theatrical teamster. Theatrical teamsters are the union workers, but we are transportation for the film production industry. So anywhere from commercials, TV shows to movies, my union is that we're pretty much 1A, 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 1B with the Teamsters in Hollywood, where we get all the big shows, we get the big commercials, we get the big TV shows and movies. And my dad opened that door for me when I made that decision to retire. And I felt so detached from basketball for about a year and a half. One of my first movies or shows I worked on, it was like a Spike Lee production. And I'm like, yo, this is fire. Spike Lee seen my truck that I had parked on the road, and he was like, somebody came to me like, yo, Spike Lee wants your truck in this scene. And I'm like, yo, Spike Lee wants my truck in the scene. I don't even watch this show, but I gotta go watch it now. Like, It didn't make it. They cut it out. But the
That's
fact that the fact that he still wanted me to be a part of it, in a sense, I'm like, yo, I could see myself sticking in this industry, but it drew me away so much from basketball because being a theatrical teamster, it's a lot of hours and it's a toll on your body. And I salute my father for doing it for so long. I now understand as a man why he couldn't necessarily always be there as a father, because being a teamster, you're working 16, 17, 18-hour days. And then you're going home to sleep for 4 or 5 hours and then you're doing it all over again. And now because I lived through it, I'm like, all right, this is very lucrative. I'm having fun with it. I'm a natural connector. So I'm building connections in the industry. But I'm like, do I necessarily want to run myself into the ground? Uh, do I necessarily want to start a family and then not be there as much because I literally lived through it through my dad? Um, because it takes a lot of your time. But at the same time, working in that industry, you can afford to live in New York. So it was like a gift and a curse at the same time. And I had to make that decision on kind of just making that pivot and just sacrificing for 5, 6 years, which I did, going back to school, getting my master's where I wasn't making six figures anymore, working in the film industry, uh, to making $1,000 a month off a scholarship check, being a GA and what you're being asked to do, and while you're still being in school, obtaining your master's. And then when I was talking about coming to those crossroads of being a GA, I understood like, all right, I don't know if I necessarily want to stay in college coaching because I was literally a part of that transition where it was COVID. But in those department meetings, we knew the transfer portal and NIL was coming, and I knew that the loyalty of the game was going to shift. That kids were no longer going to be loyal to that program anymore, and I didn't want to be a part of it because I felt so connected to kids in general. I didn't want to work my tail off to recruit somebody just for them to leave a year later if it doesn't go their way. So that's when I jumped to the NBA. Huge shout out to my brother Justin Maxey, who was one of the video coordinators on staff with the Lakers. He reached out to somebody. I can't shout him out right now because I forgot his name because I'm talking. But Justin reached out to him, and then that person reached out to me and connected me to Justin Maxey. Justin Maxey's now with the Phoenix Suns. And I came in with a group with the video associates with the Lakers where they're all doing well. Right now, Zach Gonzalez is conducting every workout with
yeah.
AJ DeBancy. He has, me and Zach, we all five of us lived together in a house in LA that year. And mind you, that roster alone had 6 Hall of Famers: LeBron James, Anthony Davis, Rajon Rondo, Carmelo Anthony, Dwight Howard. So that's 5. I might be missing. I'm sorry. My dog, Russell Westbrook. We had 6 Hall of Famers on the team. So we wanted to bring it every day, just that energy, because we'd always have to play against them when it came to ramping up, uh, going into like walkthroughs. Like we were the guys on the floor, and every day we were witnessing greatness. Like when LeBron talks, you listen because there's so much knowledge on the game. And then Rondo's giving his input. Then Melo's giving his input. Dwight's giving his input. And these are like going into each games every night. Like we're going into each game and we're talking about matchups. And there's so much knowledge and just to be a sponge and absorb all that information was like truly special. And I didn't like I literally was happy that I made that transition from college to the NBA because I knew I kind of wanted to be there because like, hey, all right, I didn't necessarily stay in the NBA and make it and play a 10-year career, but I always knew I wanted to be there because that tracks back to being a young kid at 8, 9 years old, knowing that my uncle played at the highest level, knowing that my grandfather was in that limelight in the boxing industry. I knew like if I was going to coach in the NBA, this was my path to doing it.
Definitely. I think you touch on it there at the end of like how beautiful life really is, how surreal everything gets to where it's full circle. Our journeys, everyone's journeys somewhat intertwined, but it's
Mm-hmm.
also so unique and different in its own way. And like being able to be in rooms and being able to share as one of my former coaches would say, a cup of coffee with LeBron James, literally and figuratively. being able to share a cup of coffee with guys like LeBron, Dwight Howard,
Mhm.
Carmelo, and take knowledge from them, but then also be able to give some of your own knowledge back to them, and then also to the youth now. How do you feel that those moments kind of help prepare you for your role now with Purple Rain and the TBT?
Mhm.
And then also real quick, I wanted to touch on this. Was there ever a
Yeah.
day? Was there ever a day where like LeBron came in, he might have been a little tired, and you was like kind of on him, you was kind of guarding him like you thought you would, or I the fan in me wants to know. I have to ask that question.
Yeah, nah, watching LeBron come in every day, I swear, even at his age, he was probably like 36, 37 at the time.
Hmm.
Bron was the first one in the gym, whether it was on game day at the arena, whether it was practice, whether it was an off day, watching him and his tendencies to now knowing like this how so witnessing greatness, like literally being a witness of greatness. uh I commend him because he at that point he was doing it for 20 years. And uh sometimes you'll hear Bron say like, all right, man, come on, let's wrap this up. If we got a long overdue shoot around. But Bron, you never seen him fatigue, because he knew being the face of the NBA, being the face of that organization, that was his way of one of his ways of probably showing his leadership was like, I don't never get tired. I'm always gonna be that first one in the gym. I might not necessarily be the last one to leave, but I'm gonna be here an hour, 2 hours before everybody else. And even though I didn't work with him throughout his 20 plus years in the NBA, I'm pretty sure that was his routine, and that's why he's at the level that he's at now. Uh, but man, it was times where I had to guard LeBron in a scout, where I'm like witnessing greatness as a fan, but I still got to be serious and locked in because I'm trying to help them prepare for the game. So, I would always try to get up underhand, try to make it tough. But it was like, yo, even with me being 7 foot, like I would always ask guys like him, AD, Dwight, like, yo, let me know if I'm being too physical because I don't want to lose my job.
Yeah.
If somebody gets hurt, I don't want to lose my job like at all. So, um, if I can just, if you want me being physical, if you don't want me, if you want me to take it a little lighter, you know, be transparent about that. And I think that's why, to this day, if we see each other in person, it's always love, because Randy Mims is one of LeBron. He's LeBron's day to day guy, and me and Randy Mims have a really good relationship. Randy Mims is somebody that, I had those one-on-one conversations with, because he's somebody that's been through that stage and era with LeBron every step of the way throughout his transition of his career, and just kind of picking his brain from the business side of things and just knowing, what he did from a day-to-day standpoint. I know helped contribute towards LeBron's success and making his job and life a lot easier.
Definitely. But kind of like I mentioned before, just everything that you've been able to learn, everything that you've been able to give throughout your career, how do you feel that that's best prepared you for the role you play now as the
Hmm.
general manager of Purple Rain's TBT team, and being able to play in that atmosphere, play in that tournament year after year? Um, it's kind of, again, a full circle moment being a member of Kansas University's basketball
Hmm.
program to now being the general manager of the TBT team for K State.
Yeah, so I always had a vision with Purple Rain. We were purple and black for the longest.
Mhm.
Me and Martavius Irvin, one of our best friends, we started it back up in 2015. And I took it upon myself because I know Tay, he played a few years professionally after me, and I really just took it upon myself, and obviously collabing with him, on just wanting to keep this thing going and having that vision to where we're now getting ready to play in Bramlage Coliseum. But just having that vision of not only just wanting to win the money, but we always created that brotherhood to bring guys back together, because we didn't necessarily have the time to do so, during the season because we're all playing still and whatnot. Or some of us might have retired and we're working. So just giving that opportunity to guys, even connecting with the younger guys that played after us, giving them that opportunity not only just to showcase their talents if they're looking to get a job or kind of up their resume, but allowing people to connect with the old and the younger guys. So, I love the fact that, you know, my time in LA, a lot of people don't know. And I'm gonna be honest with y'all, man. Y'all get first dibs because not a lot of people ask me to come on podcasts. So a lot of my stories I don't share, and y'all get first dibs with this. So salute to y'all as well, man. Much respect. I quietly shadowed Rob Pelinka. Rob Pelinka was a guy that he always got shit done. Excuse my language. Um, for Rob to assemble 6 Hall of Famers, whether it was after their prime, you know, to get 6 Hall of Famers on the same roster, I knew like, all right, I got to take this TBT thing to the next level, and that's when I started recruiting bees. And it didn't necessarily work out for the first 4 or 5 years. A lot of people don't know how long I've been recruiting bees, and bees is somebody that came back to K State. When after we went to the Elite Eight as my freshman year, he came and spent 2 weeks with us in the spring. And so me and him has always stayed connected. So we have a genuine friendship where I can pick up the phone and call him versus it being something transactional. Um, and I knew with having a Bees, having a Jacob Pullen, trying to get a Barry Brown and Xavier Sneed on a roster together, uh, shadowing, Rob Pelinka and just kind of watching his tendencies, not necessarily me sitting in the office with him, but kind of watching how, he's at every basketball practice. As a GM, you don't have to be at practice. Rob was one of those guys, he was at practice. So I knew, even though I was coaching Purple Rain at the same time as the head coach and the GM, I knew when I took that step back a year ago, I was always going to be hands-on because kind of monitoring Rob and kind of knowing like he was kind of always in the shadow, but he was still there present where he didn't necessarily have to give his input, towards coaching, but having a voice in the locker room, which he did, because I sat through some of those film meetings with them in the locker room. Rob was always present and feet on the ground because his presence was felt. He's somebody that represented Kobe Bryant. So Kobe Bryant's my all-time favorite player, like all time. So knowing like, all right, if I can somewhat just kind of pick certain tendencies away from him and instill those into me GMing myself, I know where I could take I know where I could take Purple Rain, and I'm still striving to be great with Purple Rain. Where I think this is just the beginning for us playing in Bramlage.
Definitely.
Definitely. And what do you think is the hardest part, of being a GM, being a coach? You mentioned Frank Martin when you're kind of talking about your college experience, like the pressure that you now notice as a coach, as a GM, that like these coaches have when they're coaching. Is that something that you feel is a hard part of having this role now? Kind of touch on that.
Yeah, no, it was tough, especially being the GM and the head coach, having those relationships, those brother relationships with those former guys that I might either played with or might have played after me, and then having to manage egos, manage friendship, manage playing time, manage winning basketball games. I had a heart to heart with Martavius and Curtis Kelly on taking that step back because I didn't want to take that step back. I fought it for like 2 years. And I knew I was being a disservice to my guys that was on my coaching staff, the guys I was asking to come play because I was doing 102 things at once with setting up, housing, setting up flights, setting up meet and greets, and then at the same time trying to conduct and win basketball games. I knew it was that time to take a step back where I could just fully focus on managing the team, building out the roster, and then trusting my staff uh, to help win basketball games. And, you know, that was a huge part for me. A lot of people don't know about was taking that step back because I was so passionate about coaching. And then I realized taking that step back and just full on GMing, uh, I don't regret it at all now.
Definitely. And when you say necessarily regret taking the step back, how are you able to see with you now being able to full time recruit bees and things like that and
Mhm.
full time recruit some of these guys to come back and play for TBT? Um, can you now see, like you mentioned, the brotherhood, and can you see the separation of you being able to be a full time, yo man, this is why we want you to be here, and not
Mhm.
necessarily from a coach's perspective of, hey, like I want you not only be here because we're brothers and play for me, but man, you being here is so much more for this community than just a basketball player, if that makes sense.
Nah, for sure. And being a part of something so special, where it took years to bring it to this light that it is now today.
Mhm.
Even some of the guys that don't necessarily want to play in TBT, I invite them to be a part of it, to just come be around love for a few days. Come get some good bump if you want to hoop. We want to do that at the same time, and then just spend time together because we put our blood, sweat, and tears into this game of basketball so much. You know, being around people that you either play with or people that might have played before you or after you, to come together and kind of share those memories and share, being back in Manhattan together or being in Kansas City for a certain amount of time, you know, that brings joy to me, where it doesn't necessarily have to be transactional. It's more of bringing guys back and having that feel. And then at the same time, in the back of my mind, like, allowing those guys that don't necessarily want to play, they're not ready to play in it, but see what we're doing here, seeing how this has grown, seeing the organization behind it. And then when that time comes, when you're comfortable with playing, knowing what it's all about because you've spent the time to come back summer after summer just to be around love and be around your brothers, to now, all right, when you want to lace it up, let's do it. I'm here. That door is always going to be open for you.
Definitely. And, forward looking into this year of TBT, you mentioned, you guys going to play in Bramlage this year, which is exciting. And then overall, just how's the squad looking and what are you most excited about for this upcoming tournament?
Yeah, the foundation starts with B's, and I got a couple non K State guys. I got one that's pretty locked in, who's a dog. He's an absolute dog. And you know, from a K State standpoint, we got 5 alumni guys right now, and probably shoot to get 2 to 3 more as well. Because I know that's what the fans want. Um, but it's about winning the game, winning $2 million. Wichita State won with like 5 or 6 Wichita State guys, and probably had a 10, 11 man roster. So, it's always based on guys' availability, but also being durable at the same time. I want to win with guys that come from a winning culture, and not necessarily you have to win at Kansas State, but not what you could just do on the court. What are your habits off the court? And those are things that, because now I'm just full on GMing, I can evaluate those things when it helps me make a decision on if I'm retaining somebody from the roster a year ago. What are their habits? What are they doing when they're playing? Overseas. Like, what does that look like? What are we doing? When we're here together as a group for a couple of weeks. What are your habits off the court? Like, are you getting enough rest? It's cool that we all chilling together, vibing together, but we got practice at 10 o'clock in the morning. I'm evaluating the guys that's staying up till 2, 3 o'clock a.m. Like, so just being able to kind of step back and not have to control being in those staff meetings, because my staff meets every night at the end of the day, at the end of practice. I'm still one of those guys because at the same time, I want to hear what's being said in those staff meetings, but also having that time to evaluate guys' tendencies and habits. A lot of that ties into the decisions I make.
Definitely. And I think my final question, in regards to the TBT and your guys' future moving forward, is the future itself. What is your, I guess, let's say 5 years down the line, what is the ultimate vision that you have for Purple Rain?
My vision behind this is not only just to win, but one day being that team that gets to scrimmage against the Team USA. Uh, they get to scrimmage against a national team, televised. Having the best talent on the floor from alumni standpoint, to not only showcase what they can do on the floor, but to play against the best players in the world. That's been my vision behind it for the longest, and I'm not gonna stop till I get there.
100%. Yeah, no,
Mhm.
I love the TBT tournament, especially, get to see a lot of guys that played a while back at these schools and getting to see them play again. So it's honestly pretty fun from a fan perspective to get to watch it. I'm out in Wichita. I don't. Do you guys play? You guys don't play in Wichita this, or is that where?
Once we win these first 2 games out of 3, and we plan on it,
Mhm.
then we go to Wichita.
Okay, nice. Yeah, I'll have to come. I'll
Yep.
tap in because I'm out in Wichita this summer working, so
Okay.
dope to come catch
Definitely
games.
gonna have to come tap into that for
Yeah,
sure.
no, that'd be
Absolutely. Absolutely. I got y'all with tickets too, man. Y'all good.
Oh
bet.
man,
Appreciate that.
appreciate it.
Yes,
Um,
sir.
Before we get into our final segment called the easy choice, just kind of backward looking question, just kind of overall perspective. Now that you look back on your career and everything, what does success look for you right now? Like, what does it look for you right now versus when you were 18 years old?
Mhm. Uh, Success looks for me right now is being consistent every day. That's something that I thrived on being 18, but I just didn't necessarily know how to. And with that consistency comes results. And now, because I've transitioned out of, it's been now 7 years, going on 8 years of playing basketball professionally. It's now putting myself in that corporate setting. I work with Shamrock Trading Corporation. They're a logistic company that focuses uh, on providing different services for trucking companies. So at the same time, just I'm a recruiter. So I naturally already know how to recruit. So now it's now learning how to recruit on the corporate side. And that success comes from being competitive as a recruiter, driving in those sales of bringing in sales reps. That's what we focus on. So I thrive in doing that now. I have fun doing it because I focus on recruiting student athletes to the company because there are student athletes in our company that are having a lot of success doing that. So having a really good relationship with Bill Ryan, who's the CEO of the company, and Martin Ryan, who's his brother, who are huge K-State fans and contributors to men's basketball and men's athletics, just K-State athletics in general. For them trusting me and being a sponsor for TBT for Purple Rain, all I want to do is be great in this company now and having that friendship with them, knowing that, they put me in a position, creating a position for me in a company to have success. I want to be consistent every day and be great at what I do.
100%. No, I think that tangibles you learn from playing sports and being a coach and all that transitions directly into the work world. And a lot of these companies, like you said, they like to look for student athletes to come work for them because they just have a lot of skills that
Yep,
make companies successful. So I think that's really cool.
absolutely.
Not gonna quit
E,
easy.
I think it's time for the your segment. I want to just go ahead and introduce
Yeah,
your
man.
little part of the
This is
episode.
this is become a highlight for the Easy Convo. We like to call
Okay.
it Easy Choice, where we have typically about 8 to 10 rapid fire questions for our guests, where you basically just make the easy choice.
Okay.
So I'm gonna ask you, are you ready?
Let's get it.
Okay, let's do it. So first question I have for you here is, what part of your game took the longest to master?
I would say the longest part of my game was my hand-eye coordination
Mhm.
on my timing with my blocks, because I was long and athletic already. When I was in high school, I didn't necessarily block a lot of shots. Like my early in my freshman sophomore year, uh, I figured it out when the game slowed down for me. But yeah, it was my timing, and then once I mastered that, that's when I was able to learn how to guard, not only just in ball screens, timing. Like if guards, get around me, having that timing and that presence to go clean and still block the shot. Once I mastered that, I was able to play at the highest level.
Okay, what's one decision in your career you're glad that you didn't rush?
Transferring from Kansas State University.
Definitely. I think through the
Mhm.
conversation, we've definitely learned that one for sure.
Yeah.
Which role challenged you more, being a player, being a coach, or now being a GM?
I would say now being a GM, uh, being able to still have those relationships with people that I generally have, but also allowing myself to be who I am as a GM and having them understand that, yeah, we're still brothers at the end of the day, but business is still business and the goal is to win. So, yeah, I would say being a GM for sure.
Definitely. And what's one habit from basketball, aside from consistency, which we just touched on,
Mhm.
what's one habit from basketball you still use in your everyday life? Maybe it's like,
One habit I use is probably being the first one in the office. no different than trying to be the first one in the gym.
Definitely. What's something you didn't appreciate as a player, but now you understand more as a grown man or as a man in a corporate world per se?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a good question, man. I would say, think on that one. Gosh, consistency is such a broad word, man. I would say, being that, not being shy, not holding back. Because as a kid, I was that shy individual. So once I learned how to speak up, once I learned how to not be hesitant on how I felt. Uh, I lost my grandfather at a really young age, and then I kind of shelled myself in. But when I got to Manhattan, Kansas, you know, I didn't have a choice but to be open and learn how to speak to people, not only just with kindness and generosity, but um, being outspoken. Those are things that I can now carry, being in that workspace now.
Final two questions I got for you is what's one moment in your journey that looked small at the time but ended up being a huge shift for you?
One moment in my journey, I would say when I had to make a decision on whether I wanted to keep playing basketball or not. I know I touched on that a little bit.
Mhm.
Uh, I was so passionate about playing. My vision behind playing basketball was always to play till the wheels fell off. And when I knew it was time to put that basketball, to stop playing basketball, uh, I will say that was probably one of the biggest decisions I had to make in my life and my journey, to then pivot into something that I wasn't familiar with, working in the trucking industry. I'm sorry, not trucking industry, but the film production industry. And then having to understand that this is not something I wanted to do for the next 25 years of my life.
Definitely. And then final question for you is what's one lesson that you want to give to any or all young athletes listening to this that you hope that they understand rather now than later?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing is, if you get to that high major program, no matter what time it is in your career, as a student athlete, or even if you go from a Division II to a low major, stick it through, because you're gonna want later on in life, when you have a family, you have your wife, you have your kids, whether it's like a little boy, a little girl that's playing basketball, you can have them somewhere to bring them back. So you're gonna be welcomed back. So I understand, getting your money, and understand the business side of it, but don't ever forget about legacy. Legacy goes a really long way, where, guys reflect back on it now, on, transferring from schools, even before, when that transfer portal first opened up, and leaving a really good situation, to now, not knowing, where that love is for them anymore, because they went from point A to point B to point C to point D. But legacy, yeah, that'd be the biggest word I would give to the young youth.
Okay. That is the easy choice.
Yes,
Appreciate
sir.
appreciate you.
Yep.
Appreciate that. Our final question for you today, we ask this to every single guest that comes onto our podcast. If you could see one person on this podcast next that you know of that you'd want to hear their story, and want their story to be showcased to the world, who would that guest be?
I would want that story to be Jacob Pullen, for sure, because a lot of people want to know Jacob Pullen's story. Jacob Pullen's one of those guys that he doesn't really speak a lot to the media. He might tweet every now and then. Uh, so I would go 1A Jacob Pullen, 1B Roddy Magruder. Roddy Magruder is somebody that literally got it out the mud, who literally worked his tail off every day in the unseen hours, and there's a reason why he was an 8-year NBA veteran without having to get drafted.
That'd be
Definitely.
awesome.
We'll,
Man,
we'll
if you,
do our we'll do our due diligence of reaching out to those guys and trying to make it happen.
Absolutely. Let me know if you need me to connect the dots, man.
Yes, sir.
definitely we appreciate
Yes,
it.
sir.
Um, from my side, we really appreciate you coming on today. Obviously, this was an awesome episode. I think anyone listening can really gain a lot of perspective and insight, of your story and, your experiences, and really take something from listening to this. So we really do appreciate you coming on.
I appreciate you guys as well and your time.
Definitely.
Definitely. I want to reiterate just what Zaid was saying. Like, I think our immediate relation of being two 6 foot, 6'10", 7 foot guys
Yep.
draws us in immediately. But then hearing your story and hearing how you continue to thrive on and off the court. It's an inspiration for me. It's an inspiration to continue to thrive in where I'm going in the world and show me that like okay, like it's possible in so many different avenues. So I'm just trying to stay the course and appreciate you for joining and sharing your wisdom with us both and with anybody listening to the episode.
No, that's love, man. I appreciate you as well and reconnecting with you. And my biggest advice to you is, man, just stick with it. Stick with it till when that time comes. It's gonna be ups and downs when it comes to playing basketball professionally. It's gonna be times where a team may not be paying you on time. It might be times where they might want to cut you, or they try to put you in a bad situation. Like, just know that when you have the right representation, just meet them halfway. Meet them halfway. I know a lot of guys that have gone through the trenches of, you know, starting out making $1,500 to $2,000 to now making $20,000 to $30,000 5 6 years later. Stay the course, man. Stay in the course, and being locked in and super focused. It's not only going to help propel your game and showcase your results, but it's going to pay off in the long run because you always be able to share those stories of being at one point to your life to where you are at that moment.
Yes, sir. Definitely. Thank you.
For sure.
Yeah, Jordan, we appreciate you coming on, man. For everyone listening, if you enjoy content like this, make sure you like, comment, share, and we'll be back
Yes,
next week.
sir. Comment,
Appreciate
like,
you,
share
Jordan.
down below.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate it, man.
All right, y'all. Appreciate y'all.